Hey, I want to thank you for being a guest here at CalmClass.com. This website is dedicated to one thing: to be able to give you a different mindset. To be able to stay calm in tough times is by changing how you think, because when you change how you think, it changes how you live. My name's Dwight Bain. I'll be your host through most of these lessons, but I'm really glad that you found us. I'm really glad that you're taking time out to watch a lesson that will be life-changing. So do this. Take good notes. Download the study guides. Let these life application principles make your life a better place. And then would you let us know how this is helping you? My thanks to you for watching. My thanks to our incredible team for making it happen. But most of all, my thanks to God, because He gives us principles that will change our life if we use them. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Yeah.
Because today we are going to talk about the incredibly dangerous thing called playing it safe. I'm going to show you the difference between playing it safe and risk, but first, before we talk about God and His Word, let's talk to Him. Lord, thank you for these friends. Thank you for those that join us electronically through these amazing technologies that Jay and Rick put together at CalmClass.com. This idea of playing it safe is deadly in our culture, God. So I pray that you would use this lesson about risk-taking to change hearts, but oh God, use it to change mine first. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So in baseball, when they say, see if I can get it right here. Safe. Is that how you do it? Safe. Here's the thing about when they say safe. Say it with me. Try it. Safe. Somebody just popped somebody's contact out. Don't hit him in the face. You're not supposed to hit him. You're just trying to get safe.
Safe.
When they yell safe in baseball, it's not because you've been having a comfy, cozy time. It's because you've been running like crazy. And so when I'm talking to you about being safe is not playing it safe. So here's a big difference. And I want you to understand. What sounds like it's safe is the most dangerous, deadly thing you can do to your health, to your family, to your finances, and certainly to your faith. Taking a risk and running like crazy toward a goal, now we're not playing it safe. But when you do that, you're going to hear, now do it with me, safe.
Safe.
Because when you're living life, I mean just trucking. See, you think I'm doing this as an illustration? No. I've got my Fitbit on, and I'm just working my way toward 10,000 steps. That's what's happening here. When you're just living life large, other people say, oh my gosh, they're not playing it safe. Big risk, big reward. And as you'll see on the cover of your study guide, and Jay, you may want to hold one up so that folks at CalmClass.com can see this. There's a picture on the front of your study guide of a young man with a mustache. And he's holding up a sign.
He looks familiar.
He does look familiar.
Could it be? Could it be?
Could it be? Could it be, Papa? It says Orlando believes in magic. And of course, we're talking about the 1980s. There was a guy from Philadelphia who was born in Philadelphia, went to school, prep school in Philadelphia, went off to Wake Forest for a little while, knew that he was going to be hearing safe because he knew he was going to be a Major League Baseball player. He knew it. He knew it. Gets to Philadelphia, goes from Philadelphia to Chicago to Atlanta, back to Philly, wins some NBA championships. Can you say Dr. J? In fact, Pat, wasn't one of your first trips to Orlando to be able to get Daryl Dawkins?
That's my first trip.
First trip to Orlando to recruit the mighty Daryl Dawkins who passed away last year. So if you're from Philadelphia, big sports town. They've got baseball, they've got hockey, they've got football, they've got crime. I mean, one of the former mayors of Philadelphia said, aside from the murders, Philadelphia is a fantastic place. That's actually a true quote. So if you're from Philly, and there's an opportunity, and somebody says, why don't you come to Orlando and start a basketball team with no arena, no fan base, and no concept that it would even work. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a pretty interesting story, because at this season of life, Helen, you might say, well, man, to be one of the co-founders of the Orlando Magic, that was playing it easy. You don't understand the middle 1980s. So let me bring you up to speed with a quote from the Orlando Sentinel. This is from February 11th, February 15th. So this is literally almost to the day. A couple years ago, listen. Pat Williams has bone cancer. I've delivered many a motivational speech about the stuff you always hear about in sports, says Williams, the founder and executive president of the Orlando Magic. I've stood there and told other people you can't give up, you've got to show courage, perseverance, and will. Now I get to live out the things I always talk about. That's a privilege. It's time to focus on pulling for Pat and keeping this civic treasure as a member of our community for years to come. Let's face it, without Pat Williams, sitting right here, without Pat Williams in Orlando, there would be no Orlando Magic, period. The only pro sports we'd have had here would be wrestling and rodeo, the two R's, wrestling and rodeo. A quarter of a century ago, Williams was one of two people who had the ridiculous idea they could bring a professional basketball team to a transient city in the middle of a football fanatical state. Williams and Orlando businessman Jimmy Hewitt were laughed at and called foolish dreamers for thinking little Orlando could become big league. Williams has always been a believer. He's always been a persuader, but even he knows this will be his biggest sell job. It's one thing to fight a small-time perception and bring the NBA to Orlando. It's another to fight a voracious form of cancer that eats away at your bones. And might be honest, yes. And I want you to know, your prayers, Pat's faith, your prayers, and a lot of being able to remember the mission is remission. This is almost to the day 5 years ago. Wow. So I want you to understand, playing it safe, thinking you're going to hear safe, it's not how it works. That's not how it works. If you want to hear safe, you're going to have to put some feet in motion. Ruth, I learned that if all you have to do is move your arms, you don't really have to move your feet, and the Fitbit thing will still work. It's the coolest thing. It's like everywhere I'm at, it's like, okay, all right. And you think, man, that Bane's energetic. No, I'm just trying to get my 10,000 steps. Swing the arms, swing the arms, swing the arms. Oh, hit somebody next to you. Okay. Now, I wasn't there, but my parents told me that because of the Great Depression, many banks failed. And banks failed, and people, because they didn't trust in banks, they put their money in mason jars. You know how hard it is to find one of these in stores this time of year? Man, I had to look around. They put their money in mason jars, and there's some money in here. But you know what? If you put your money in a mason jar and you hide it, there's a big problem. Because if you do that, and you get hit by a truck, nobody in your family is going to know where the money is. And let me tell you, you have to listen carefully. Let me tell you what you can hear inside the mason jar. There's a little voice.
Relax, calm down now. Don't relax. Take it easy.
Can you hear that? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Put it next to the microphone.
Calm down now. Don't stress. Take it easy.
Right? So inside this, I'm going to play it safe, is this little voice of, this is, some hospital gave this to me, and I thought, oh, that's clever. Because the idea of just relax, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy. You do that, and you take your treasure and you hide this away, you're never going to experience any growth. This will not collect any interest. It'll collect dust, but it won't collect any interest. Playing it safe, and the people who did that during the Great Depression, yeah, they had some mason jars that had some money. And on a field trip with my son, we went to the FDIC, the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., and literally there were mason jars that were just full of money. But guess what happens after a while? Because it's just a mason jar, not waterproof. The money would meld together, and it would be in a big wad. I mean, like that big around, and it would meld together into like one solid piece. And guess what? It wasn't that safe. However, the people who said, I'm not going to put my money in a jar in the backyard, I'm going to put my money into my kids, or put my money into being able to buy some better tools to work my way out of this depression. Those people invested. It's called ROI. If you've ever gone to a business training seminar, it's called return on investment. I'm going to teach you the R to R formula. Risk, reward. Matter of fact, let's take a look at it. In your study guide, everything good in life, and by the way, I do rejoice, not just that there was a guy named Pat Williams I met with a mustache, and he had a basketball under one arm and a stack of season ticket sign-ups for a team that didn't exist under the other arm. And you talk about faith. First time I met Pat was in downtown Orlando. Pat, I don't know if you remember, it was at the old Radisson, and I was the president of a marketing group, and Pat came in and said, what do these people need to hear? And I said, well, here's the audience, and here's what they need to hear. First time that we had met. He had just started pitching the magic, and I watched him stand up for 30 minutes, no notes, and mesmerize a crowd of people. And Pat hadn't changed since. I mean, you can share a message with an audience. That's one of the reasons I admire you so much. You don't play it safe. You hear safe, but it's not because you're sitting back. You took a risk, and it really did inspire this lesson. So let's take a look. Everything good in life involves a risk. T.S. Eliot said, only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far they can go. So right next to that, write the initials, B-H-A-G, BHAG. BHAG. Now this is not a beauty tip, for individuals. It stands for big, hairy, audacious goals. And BHAGs in the motivational world isn't just a goal, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's like, that's just outrageous. That could never happen. Nobody could do that. Now you're in BHAG territory. I mean, a BHAG might be to say, everybody in my family tree has been an alcoholic, but it stops here. That's a BHAG. BHAG might be, everybody in my family ends up divorced, and that stops here. We're going to work on our relationship. A BHAG might be, that child has walked away from God, but I still pray every day on my knees. BHAG. I'm gonna pray that child back to Christ. BHAG might even be, here's outrageous, that this country could find their knees and repent and say, oh God, because remember, it's not finding better leaders who are better talkers. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray. So before we look for better candidates, make sure you're praying for your country. Make sure that you're an appropriate candidate. Make sure that there's something in your life that says, God, I'm going to live out my faith today. Because when you do that, when I do that, now we're making America a better place. Second principle, the most dangerous thing you can do is get comfortable and avoid risks. The most dangerous thing you can do is to get comfortable. All right, so here's what happens for many people. They retire. They've got some 401k money that they get on a statement that says, I can take it easy. And the average person who retires at age 65, guess what happens? They retire, they sit on the couch, they start watching the Golf Channel, and the research says that within about 2 years, they're dead. I mean, dead. Isn't that tragic? That's terrifying. Because they're sitting on the couch with the remote control, here we go, sitting on the couch, sitting on the dock at a bay, watching the tide roll away, and as they're sitting on the couch, clicking through channels, they don't realize that's the most dangerous thing they can do. To go and volunteer at the girls' club and the boys' club, to go get involved, take a class at the YMCA. Now you're living life. And so when you take a look at that principle, the most dangerous thing you can do, and here's the paradox. Well, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to hear safe. No. You have to take a risk if you want to accomplish something. No risk, no return, no reward. I remember there was, because I'm on the board of Z88.3, and a friend of mine started that station, and so we've heard some pretty interesting stories of people that used to listen to the Z, and something inside of them sparked, and they said, I think I can be a recording artist and be on the Z. There was a teenage girl who went to school right here in Orlando. Pat, you know her name's Karen. She spells it with a Y. She was listening to Z88.3 radio, and she said, I think I can be a recording artist. And she had to go to Nashville and work at Thomas Nelson and work her way through. And Pat, Karen's here today. Karen, could you stand up? Could you stand up? Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Karen Williams took a risk and said, I'm going to try this. I taught my son when he was in Little League. Now, I didn't know much about Little League, but I know this. When the ball's coming at you, son, just take a look at it and swing, because so many of these kids in Little League, they're sitting there just terrified, and the ball goes whoosh, 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 and it's like, at least swing at the sucker. You might connect with it. One of the saddest days of my life. I was at a training event in Miami. Garrett had a game that afternoon. I said, I'm going to leave at lunchtime. I can be from Miami to the ball field at Lake Fairview. I can be there in about 4.5 hours. Man, one of the saddest days of my life. So, Pat, I'm on the turnpike. There's a wreck. Instead of it taking 4.5 hours, it took almost 7 hours. I'm on the phone the whole time. Sheila's like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Anyway, Garrett, the only time he ever did it, he just took a swing at it. He got lots of hits, but it was his one and only home run in Little League. Missed it. And it's like, Dad, gummit. And Garrett was like, Dad, it's okay. I did exactly what you said. I just kept swinging. Even though I didn't get to see it, Sheila was telling me about it. That was back before FaceTime. I was hearing the play-by-play. And she said, he hit, it went way out in the outfield, and he just started running and running and running. And then the kid in the outfield overthrew the second baseman, and he just kept running and running. And finally heard, safe. But you don't hear safe if you're not running. Turn to somebody next to you and say, you got to be running. You got to be running. Take a look on page 3 in your study guide. That's why you have to have a study guide. You see that chart? Here's what's interesting. Risk preference varies by age and risk level. Now here's what that means. So risk seeking is higher on the chart. And Jay, maybe just hold up the chart so people at CalmClass can watch it. Because risk seeking and the 6 to 7-year-old, man, they'll take a risk. They'll take high risk. And here's the principle. This is an important principle if you're a grandparent. Never, I'm not kidding, never give a 5-year-old boy Superman pajamas with the cape. You do not want to do that. You can give him Superman pajamas, but you don't give him Superman pajamas with a cape, because what does a 5-year-old do on the top of his bunk bed? Man, he's coming off of that. You can give him Batman pajamas with a cape, because Batman's got to have a robe, but no, Superman doesn't need a robe. You're going to have some emergency room visits. Because if you tell the 5-year-old, hey, jump and Daddy will catch you, 5-year-old might say, let's do this thing. You tell somebody who's 60 years old, jump and I'll catch you, and it's like, okay, I want to see the risk management principles here. What else you got to catch me down there? Because the older we get, you'll notice on the chart, the more risk averse we get. And the one group that are the most terrified of taking a risk are adults, particularly middle to senior aged adults. As you'll see on the chart, they won't take a risk at all. That's also why they lose so much. Because it's like, you get to a certain point, it's like, I'm afraid, I got to play it safe. Oh, I got to hold on to my stuff. Oh my gosh. Instead of, you know what? Man, let's just dive out there in the big old unknown. So as you take a look at this, look at the quote from Agatha Christie. Oh, thank you. I'm breaking their stuff. My favorite quote of the whole lesson. Funniest Pat Williams quote is the first quote about the Orlando Magic. That's your funniest quote, and Jay Strack and I agree. If you ever see like those big industrial-sized cans of corn, when you can see that, you can just think of Pat Williams, because you have the corniest jokes. They're fantastic. They are fantastic. But my favorite quote in the whole lesson is right here from Agatha Christie, the mystery writer. Listen to what she said. In my opinion, half the people who spend their lives avoiding being run over by buses had much better be run over and put safely out of the way. They're no good. Wow. Agatha Christie's like, make them a speed bump because they're in the way. Boom, boom. What was that sound? I think that was your Uncle Fred. He's always been against everything, and now all of a sudden he's a speed bump. Didn't slow us down, just boom, boom, boom. He just, what was that sound? It was all those critical people in your life. Being able to see You cannot live out success in life, you cannot live out faith in life if you do not take a risk. If you want to hear safe at the end of your journey, then you have to be running towards something. Look at the next principle. Why take a risk? Risk-taking is brilliant. It builds confidence. Risk-building builds faith. 1969, I knew I wanted to be a Christian psychologist on the radio in Orlando, making a difference for God. 1969. But 10 years passed, more than 10 years passed, hadn't done that quite yet. Because it took going away to school, getting trained. And I can remember crying, because I love my mom and dad. I love Orlando. And I can remember I literally had to pull my car over when I was headed to Liberty University. My Oldsmobile was packed to the roof, Cutlass Supreme, everything every cubic inch that I could put something in there because I was moving to an apartment. All I had was the folding cot, the stuff that was in my car. That was it. It took everything. My parents said, we can afford for you to be there for 1 year. You're going to have to figure out the rest. I so loved Orlando. And when I got to the first rest stop on Interstate 75 from Orlando, right before Ocala, I had to pull over because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road to drive. Because it felt like something was dying. I love my family. I love Orlando. And it also felt like, man, God, I'm so scared. So I take that orange Oldsmobile and I drive on up to Lynchburg, Virginia. I get there 2 days before the new student orientation because I knew I had to find a place to live in a town that I'd only been to once to look at this college. Had to find a place to live, had to get moved in, had to find some food. I did what all college students do. I went to Pizza Hut and I said, what's the biggest thing you got? And they told me, and I got the biggest pizza they had. And the next morning, because I didn't have like a toaster oven or anything, so the next morning in some hotel, wherever I was at, I had cold pizza the next morning. Because that's like the basic, that's like one of the food groups if you're a college student, is cold pizza the next morning, right? Not sure that cold pepperoni and sausage on that pizza probably was good for me and future heart problems, but so 2 days later, man, I'm talking to God. The weepiness had stopped because I knew in order to fulfill the bigger dream, I had to have the right education, the right training, the right credentials. So I knew I was supposed to be there. And God had worked out the details. I'd gone to a non-accredited Bible college, and there was a guy named Elmer Towns who, and I didn't know this at the time, but Elmer in 1952 at Southern Methodist University had come from an unaccredited Bible college, and every year at SMU there was one guy who would take a chance on one student per semester to be able to say, you come in on academic probation and let's see what you can do. Now I knew that semester I was that one guy. I'd never met Elmer Towns, I just knew him through letters. And he said, you're coming on academic probation because you didn't go to an accredited school, we're going to give you a chance. But I didn't know until literally last year, Elmer and I were having lunch. I went to a small Bible college called Heritage College. I'd gone to Valencia for 2 years and then to a Bible college for 3 years. But the Bible college wasn't accredited.
So 5 years of college.
Well, I started before they had the dual enrollment thing. So by the time I left high school, I already had almost 2 years of college done. Because I was a nerd and I hadn't found girls yet, so I just had nothing to do. There was no ESPN, John, so I mean, it's like, well, I guess I may as well finish some more college classes. I mean, heck, there's nothing to do.
So you went to Liberty as a junior?
I went to Liberty for graduate school. I went for my master's degree.
I didn't.
So Elmer told me, he said, the reason I do that and give people a chance is somebody did that for me. I didn't know that till last year. I said, you're kidding. You too? He said, yeah. So I go to the new student orientation picnic at a place called Treasure Island. If you've ever been to Liberty, it doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed in a flood back in the 1990s. But it had this rickety old bridge that was a one-lane bridge that literally had boards on it. It looked like you were going to die getting across this bridge. I mean, it was terrifying.
Swing bridge?
Yeah. It was a steel bridge, one-lane bridge, and it went down into the James River, and Treasure Island was where they had like a youth camp, basically. And that's where the new student orientation was that year. I'd found a basement apartment. I'd moved my stuff out of my car, and so I get there 2 hours early. because I have nothing to do. I know no one in this town. I get there 2 hours early to think, okay, I want to make sure I get to the new student orientation, right? Get there, sitting in my car, just praying, and after a couple hours, a white Buick pulls up. And this old guy with a bald head gets out and starts unloading boxes. Now what's funny is, it was Elmer Towns. I didn't know that. I'd never met him. And so, I was trained, whenever you see an old guy unloading boxes. The funny thing is, Tim, he was younger then than I am now. And I swear to you, I am not old. I am not old. Elmer was only 50, and he was unloading boxes. And as he was unloading boxes, I thought, man, there's not another soul here. So I ran out and said, sir, can I help you unload those boxes? And he said, sure. What's your name? And I told him, and at that moment on Treasure Island, I remember where I was standing, he said, you're that student from Orlando that's coming up here on probation this semester. I said, yes, sir. He said, I see good things for you. And from that moment until this moment, Elmer has mentored me and opened doors for me. But I want you to know, had I not got in an orange Oldsmobile and driven to Lynchburg, Virginia, then I would not have met Elmer Towns on an island that doesn't even, there's no buildings on it anymore. It was destroyed in a flood. I wouldn't have built a relationship with Elmer, which led to a relationship with Jerry Falwell, which led to meeting John Maxwell, because Elmer said in the 1980s, you and John think alike. And I said, who's John? He said, this is this guy in San Diego. You guys think a lot alike. And if I hadn't met Elmer and watched how Jerry Falwell worked with the media, then I wouldn't have had the courage to be able to come back to Orlando, literally not even a month after graduating, to start a Christian counseling center and to say to Channel 2 News and Channel TV 35, sure, I can talk about that, because back then there were only a few Christian counselors in the state of Florida, less than 10. And in Orlando, at a time in 1984, Orlando, there was no Universal Studios. Epcot had barely opened. I mean, this place just wasn't like you see today. And so at lunch a couple of weeks ago, Pat, I was talking to somebody, and he said there are 3 people that changed Orlando. He said Bill Frederick, who had a vision. Of course, Bill was the former mayor of Orlando. And he said Bill had a vision. And he said Jim Henry, because Jim Henry had the faith. And then he said Pat Williams, because he brought professional sports to this town. Now, there are other people you can think of, Harris Rosen, but I want you to know, when you start to look at, you don't hear safe, well played, home run, if you don't take a risk. And had I not gotten into that old Oldsmobile, I'd have never been standing here today, at least doing the things that I'm doing. I took a risk, and so when I think about this lesson, if you'll take a look at the next principle, risk-taking. Oh.
Great story.
Risk-taking is not gambling. Do you see that? The greatest gamble you can take, and I'm about to make half the people mad. And Jay, people watching CalmClass.com on their smartphone are about to turn it off, and they're going to send some negative comments. But here it comes. Buckle up, Buttercup. Here it comes. The greatest risk you can take is education. Let me explain. Because education is saying, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get a degree, and I'm going to sit back, and life's going to be easy. Nope. Nope. Education, I think, is the greatest risk. Now watch this. Right down next to it, LLL. Lifelong learner. Now you're in a zone where you can accomplish something. Because gambling is to say, I'm going to do this and it's going to work. Kind of like we talked about last week about luck. I'm going to have my lucky rabbit's foot. Not so lucky for the rabbit, but it's lucky for me. I'm going to rub my rabbit's foot and it's going to work out. Well, no, it's not how it works. Because to just say I'm going to get a degree and then all of a sudden I'm going to put my resume out there and it's going to be easy. Nope, it's not. There's too much competition.
Yeah.
There may have been a time that worked, 1950s maybe, but now you just have a college degree and you put a resume out there, you're going to be sitting for a long time waiting for those comments to come back from Monster.com or to come back from Indeed or LinkedIn. Not going to happen for you. Lifelong learning means I didn't stop learning when I finished college. Because if so, then you haven't learned anything in a long time. Turn to someone next to you and say, you need to learn more. You need to learn more. You need to learn more. We all need to learn more. Gambling is not risk-taking, but watch this. Gambling is more risky than risk-taking because in gambling, I'm going to go to Vegas and I'm going to win $1 million. Nope, in Vegas, who wins?
Wow.
The house always wins. Now, to those of you who grew up Baptist and you're saying, what is gambling? What is this concept? You've never played cards, and you've never, I grew up hearing, don't dance, don't smoke, don't chew, and don't go with girls that do. And I want you to know, Pat, I've never dated a girl that chewed tobacco. I made a commitment it's not going to happen. I've got my standards. I have never dated a girl who chewed tobacco. So if you grew up and you did not understand gambling, the house wins is a concept called you go to Vegas or Atlantic City or on a cruise, and you can spend money and call it gaming because it's just a form of entertainment. Some people spend money in the gift shop and they buy $25 t-shirts that say, my grandparents went on a cruise and all I got was this t-shirt. And I've talked to enough children who've gotten those t-shirts, save your $25. They do not like getting that t-shirt. It does not make them happy. Some people like to spend their money in the gift shop, and some people like to spend their money at the roulette table. Great. Gaming. Gambling can be very addictive because gambling is saying, I'm going to get rich. All right, so let me share with you some people who thought that. Laura and Roger Griffiths won a $2.76 million lottery jackpot in 2005. They had hardly ever argued until they won. They bought a $1 million house and a Porsche. 6 years later, after their win, Roger drove away in the Porsche after Laura confronted him over emails suggesting that he was interested in another woman. Their 14-year marriage ended, a freak fire gutted the house, and every penny of their fortune was gone. Bud Post lost $16.2 million within a nightmarish year. He went in the Pennsylvania lottery, but within 1 year he was $1 million in debt. Wins $16 million within 1 year, $1 million in debt. I wish it had never happened, Post said. Winning the lottery was a total nightmare. A former girlfriend successfully sued him for a share of his winnings. His brother was arrested for hiring a hitman to murder him in the hopes he would inherit the winnings. You think you have interesting relatives at Thanksgiving. After sinking money into various family businesses, Post sank into debt, spent time in jail for firing a gun over the head of a bill collector. Now that one, you want to go to jail, that one pretty much will do it. Hi, I'm here from Sears and I'm going to pick up the refrigerator, and you shoot at the guy. Now Bud lives quietly on $450 a month and food stamps. Martin and Kay Tott won a $5 million jackpot, but they lost the ticket. He was 33, his wife was 24. They missed out on a $5 million lottery after losing their ticket. They were able to convince officials, but since there was a 30-day time limit on reporting lost tickets, the jackpot became the largest unclaimed amount since the lottery began in the UK in 1994. And here's what the wife said. Thinking you're going to have all that money is really liberating, but having it taken away from you is the opposite effect, she said to the Daily Mail. It drains away the life from you and puts a terrible strain on your marriage. This has been the cruelest torture I've ever experienced. And I've got page after page after page after page of people that have won big lotteries and lost it all and said it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. So when I talk about gambling, the house wins, what that means is that Las Vegas and Atlantic City and the cruise line company, they're not really in the benevolent business of saying everyone who comes on, here's $1 million, here's $1 million for you, here's $1 million for you. That's what politicians do at election time. Here's $1 million for you, here's $1 million for you, and you're all going to be rich and a chicken in every pot. It's going to be great. You know, give me your vote. Gambling, the house wins. Risk-taking is totally different. So as you take a look at this principle, every major successful venture begins with a risk. Marriage, that's a risk. Dating, that's a risk. You have to ask that person out on a date. An audition. Karen Williams at one point had to audition, and somebody had to say, this girl's got some pipes. There was an audition. Asking for a raise, that's a risk. What's the worst thing they can say if you ask for a raise? No. Yeah, that's if you ask Donald Trump for a raise. You're out of here, baby.
You're fired.
Friendships, there's a risk involved. Freedom, the freedom in our country. If a bunch of pilgrims had not taken a risk to get on a leaky boat called the Mayflower and get seasick and end up somewhere on Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts, we wouldn't be sitting here today. America would have eventually been discovered. It would be like Europe. There'd be a bunch of little city-states, a bunch of little countries, probably 13 to 15 countries, kind of like Western Europe. And each one would kind of do their own deal. But there wouldn't be a United States because it took a risk. You should take a look at this. Inventions. Somebody had to take a risk. Job interviews. Going to college. Changing careers. And you see that one? Let's fill in the blank. What's been your biggest risk? What's the biggest risk you've ever taken? Write it in the blank. Because risk-taking is heroic. Listen to Philip Zimbardo. I'm saying that to be a hero means that you step across the line, you're willing to make a sacrifice. So heroes are always making sacrifices. Heroes always take a risk. Heroes always deviate. Heroes are always doing something that most people don't and that we want to change. He said, I want to democratize heroism and say any of us can be a hero. Turn to somebody next to you and say, you can be a hero.
You can be a hero.
And then look him dead in the eye and say, if you take a risk. If you take a risk.
What does democratize mean?
He wanted to level the playing field so that there was a democracy, that instead of it being one or two men or women who become heroes, everybody can be a hero. Everybody can be a hero if you take a bigger risk. All right, so look at the first principle. A life with no risk means a life with no rewards. A life with no risk means a life with no rewards. Jim Rohn said, if you're not willing to risk the unusual, you'll have to settle for the ordinary. You'll have to settle for average.
Like for reward or revelation.
Yeah, yeah. God has a vision. And when you can start to see the vision that God has for you, it is a revelation. When you start to think about the building that we're sitting in, I remember being in a service and Jim Henry, our pastor emeritus, said, we need a fellowship hall. We need a place where the entire congregation can come together. We need a place where we can prepare meals. This was an expensive, big, hairy, audacious goal. And Brother Jim said, I don't think we ought to build things, because he came out of that Depression era. He said, I don't think we ought to build things if we don't have the cash in the bank. The first time I heard about First Baptist Orlando's generosity, I was a student at Liberty University. And this church gave in one offering, when they were moving from downtown Orlando to this property, in one offering, millions of dollars. Cash! Diamond rings, gold watches. Now, Jerry Falwell was an interesting person I learned a lot from. But I can tell you what, you want to get Jerry's attention? And he came in and he said, there's this church down in Orlando, Florida, and they're giving like $1 million offering. We can do better than that. One person's story of faith stirred up another person in faith. That's how it works. When you take a big step, when you hear, safe, good job, man, you put some points on the board. You don't realize who's watching you, but I want you to know, Carla, they watch you, and they're able to say, wow, if she can do it, I can do it. Man, it gives other people courage when they see you taking a step, and you're out there running. And when you accomplish things, it gives them. When you don't take a risk, you can never win. When you don't take a risk, you can never win. Number 3, risks are often the path that God uses to develop greater strength. Don't you love the picture of the person scuba diving with the black-tipped sharks? Yeah, I looked up on Google Images, I looked up living life large, and that picture came up, and I thought I typed in living life large. I didn't type in living life with a death wish. I don't want to swim with sharks. But if that was your big, hairy, audacious goal, man, go big. When you take a look at this, risks are often the path that God uses to develop greater strength. Listen to Ralph Waldo Emerson. Don't be too afraid and squeamish about your actions. All of life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. When you take a look at this, the single greatest roadblock that's going to keep you from hearing safe, single greatest roadblock to a life of high risk is fear. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the F word in the Christian faith. Now, some of you are thinking, the F word, what does that mean? Well, it's feelings, and I know we're not supposed to talk about feelings very much, because that, sometimes, but there is an F word. I grew up in a Baptist home. The F word for Christian people, fear. The thing that's holding you back, fear. The thing that's keeping you from the life that God designed for you, usually it's fear. It's not critical people. It's not your past. It's not your education. It's fear. Look at number 5. Risks can be measured, but the benefits are usually 10 times greater. William Wallace, the character portrayed by Mel Gibson in Braveheart. Men of Scotland! Right? But when he said, every man dies, but not every man lives. We can stand here today and we can say they might be able to take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. Man, every time I see that, I want to paint my face blue and go and get on a horse and tackle somebody. It's like, yeah, man, that's a motivating story. And why is Scotland free? And why a couple of years ago when Scotland said, you know, United Kingdom, we don't know exactly what you're doing for us. We might want to go do something else. And there was a big controversy because if Scotland left the UK loses. And Sheila's family are Scottish. That's a translation that means frugal financially, I think is what that means. But you know what? When I think about incredible things that have happened, it's because somebody took an incredible risk. Don't be afraid. Turn to somebody next to you and say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Number 6. Taking a risk is a sign that you're living life instead of just watching life. Taking a risk is a sign you're living life instead of watching it. It was during the Eisenhower administration. I don't remember it. But my mom and dad, me and Clint Bain, got into 1957 Chevy and headed to a place called Central Florida. Now, their relatives who stayed in Kentucky are like, man, you guys, you got to Florida at just the right time before real estate took off and before this happened and that happened. But my mom and dad said, we wanted our son to have a better opportunity. And the mountains of Kentucky did not have the opportunity they wanted for me. So I'm the recipient. When I think about great people in my life, it's me and Clint Bain, because I'm the recipient. They took a risk of leaving everything that was known in Kentucky, where they had family and property and resources, and where they had school and all their friends, to come to a wide spot in the road called Orlando, Florida. This was not a big place back during the Eisenhower administration. It was a safe place. It was a nice place. Good place to raise a family. There was citrus and there was cattle. And there was almost no crime. I can remember it wasn't until I was in high school that I heard about somebody being murdered here. I mean, everybody just stopped. It was a woman at our church, and everybody stopped and said, you mean somebody was murdered here? Like a person working at a store was murdered? We couldn't even imagine. Boy, how things have changed. My parents took a risk, and guess what? Your parents took a risk too. At some point, you had somebody who took a risk, and the greatest risk at some point, probably for many of us, is that somebody said, but do you know Jesus as your Savior? You went to an event somewhere, and a pastor, a youth minister, a music person was singing about something. I can't remember it, but my parents said they were watching Billy Graham on TV, and my mom said, we dedicated you to the Lord when you were about 3 years old. That's why I'm standing here, godly parents. Somebody took a risk. Yay for mom and dad.
Yeah.
Somebody took a risk in your life to share what faith was about. But here's the dangerous thing, because if you want to live life, you want to hear safe, it's because you took a risk or somebody took a risk. Look at the next principle. Avoiding small risks guarantees massive problems later. And I know there's a division of most companies called human resources, and I know there's something called risk management, and I know they're trying to avoid lawsuits, and I get that. I understand that. I'm a trainer for the Cigna healthcare company. This week on the national webcast, I was teaching to a lot of HR people who do risk management. But I'm telling you, the greatest, riskiest thing you can do is to play it safe. I'm not talking, goofy, risky behavior, come to work drunk. No, that's not a good idea. To develop a side income of growing marijuana and selling it, don't think that's a good idea. Risky behavior. I remember one fellow, he was 64, and he started dating his 19-year-old assistant's part-time assistant. And he was in leadership of this company, and it's like, couldn't you have gone to like the Starbucks across the street to date a girl the age of your granddaughter? I mean, wouldn't that have been a little simpler? Because now the company's going to get sued. So if you want to date somebody in your company, I'm thinking that's high risk. That's risk management. I'm not talking about risk management to avoid litigation. If you have a dog that bites, put up a fence. Get the dog a muzzle. I'm talking about risk management with your life. And in particular with your faith, because look at this next one. The greatest risk is to avoid God and to avoid His Word. So Jesus tells a really interesting story. And this story has eternal implications. It's like the 3 people I heard about that died and went to heaven at the same time. They were in a plane crash. There was a truck driver from Texas. There was a businessman from Atlanta, Georgia. And then there was a businesswoman from Manhattan. And they're standing there, and Peter says, before I let you in, there's an entrance exam to get into heaven. And so he pulls the truck driver from Texas aside and said, the entrance exam, take a breath. And the truck driver was a little nervous. He said, just take a breath. It's an easy exam. Just spell God. And the truck driver says, well, G-O-D. And Peter smiles and says, come on in. He turns to the next person in line, a businessman from Atlanta, and said, and the businessman said, my priest never told me. He said, just chill. Just come here. Whispers in his ear, spell God. And the guy from Atlanta just turns back and says, well, G-O-D, kind of nervous. And Peter says, yes, come on in. Well, about this time, the businesswoman from Manhattan is ticked. She said, my whole life, men have been chosen in front of me, and my whole life, I'm a feminist, and don't you understand, I'm an important woman from New York City. And Peter said, just take a breath. Spell Czechoslovakia. It's a simple test. Eternal, that didn't really happen, I just heard about it. Pat Williams' joke book. So there is a test, and Jesus talks about it. Listen to Matthew 25, starting at verse 14. Therefore, Jesus said, keep watch, because you do not know the day, you do not know the hour. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants. And he entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags of gold, to another 1 bag. Each one, underline it, according to his ability. According to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went out at once. Underline the word once. He went out at once and put his money to work, and he gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold, he gained 2 bags more. Man, they got on it. They got after it. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Whoa. He took the money and put it in a jar and buried it in the ground. After a long time, the master of these servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. His master said, well done, good and faithful servant! Exclamation point. You have been faithful with a few things. I'm going to put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Now here it comes. The man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you're a hard man, harvesting where you had not sown and gathering where you had not scattered seed. So I was afraid. And I went and I hid your gold. I hid it in the ground. I hid it in the ground. Now, and look at how he justifies himself. He said, I hid it in the ground, and here is what belongs to you. Every penny. The master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. See where he called him lazy? And he called him wicked. You played it safe? You dug a hole in the ground? No. He said, you knew that I harvest where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put the money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have at least received it back with some interest. So here's what's going to happen. Take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Underline the word abundance. If you want abundance, you took a risk somewhere. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Write the word scarcity in your notes. Scarcity. And throw that worthless servant outside, where there will be weeping, into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. See, this idea, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to play it safe with my life. I'm going to play it safe with my faith. You may be staring at hell, my friend. God doesn't like play it safe. He likes to say, safe, good job. You took a risk. Wow, look at how it paid off. God's big on that one. But to say, I'm going to take what God gave me, I'm going to take the light that he gave me, and I'm going to hide it under a bushel. When I was a little kid in Sunday school, hide it under a bushel, and they would teach the kids, no, I'm going to let it shine. God gave you some talent. God gave you some ability. And more importantly, God gave you a story. God gave you faith. And to live in fear and not do anything with that, not only is wrong, Jesus taught, and Scripture shows here, you better question what you believe. After this, in Matthew 25, Jesus said, here's how it's going to work. At the judgment, there are going to be sheep on one side, and there are going to be goats on the other, and they're headed to hell. Don't be in that group. You say, well, how can I not be in that group? Look at your life. Are you playing it safe? Are you living in fear? Are you taking the faith that God gave you? And I'm afraid to say anything about my faith. Man, I'm just embarrassed. People might judge me. Well, there's another judgment I would want to avoid. There's a 10th principle. Look at it. When you take a bold risk, other people will always follow you to a better place, especially in faith. When you take a bold stand and you say, Orlando's a sports town, and you bring the magic, then you get Orlando City as a bonus. When you take a big step in business and you do something big, Steve Jobs said when he invented this thing, remember 9 years ago this was an idea. People made fun of him. Hi, Dwight Bain here, and I want to tell you about CalmClass.com. The website that you came to is actually a teaching lesson that we record in Orlando, Florida, every single week. You can actually come be part of the live audience. If you're in Florida, maybe you're visiting the Orlando area, come check us out. We meet at 3000 South John Young Parkway. It's on the campus of First Baptist Orlando, which is actually a pretty large place. So what you're looking for is a large building by a lake. It's a big 3-story building called Faith Hall. And we're in Faith Hall, upstairs in room 301. But if you don't get a chance to come live to the presentation in Orlando, then if these lessons about making your life work better, to get past frustration in relationships, maybe frustrations on the job, maybe you're just kind of feeling beat up about what you believe. If you enjoy these lessons, would you do me a favor? Would you tell a friend? Because by your experience of telling other people, hey, this website helped me, these lessons helped me, when you're doing that, you're helping take the message that we teach in Orlando and to be able to spread that to the entire world. And thanks.